Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for our December 22nd meeting of the New York State Independent Redistricting Commission. Thank you all so much for joining today. Happy holidays. First on our agenda is the current funding situation. Karen, do you have an update on that?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have an update.
Okay. I know I speak for the commission when I thank those who have advocated for us for the release of the funding, including the leadership of both the Democratic and Republican leadership in both houses, NALEO, the League of Women Voters, and other organizations. I imagine, do any other commissioners want to weigh on this issue? I mean, I think I agree with everyone that it is imperative that this funding be released as soon as possible.
Sure. Actually, Commissioner Imamura, thank you for opening it. And we had a little audio issue, at least from my perspective, with Co-Executive Director Blatt's comment. I didn't quite hear the end of it. I don't know if it got lost on the tape or it was just me.
I'm sorry. I said I don't have an update.
Okay. Yeah, so Commissioner Imamura, you had said that the majority's leadership had weighed in favor of getting this funding released. I know I saw a letter from Minority Leader Ort on the Senate side. Was there anything in writing from the other legislative leadership?
They've been in contact with the executive's office and they've been pushing for this funding to be released.
Okay.
Could the commissioners receive a copy of any correspondence such as Commissioner Wofford just referred to? Records? As
yes.
it's generated.
I did send an email.
Yeah,
with
I have it.
Letter attached. I'll resend it to you. Okay.
Okay, Assembly Member or Senator. Okay.
So that's helpful if we can get all of that as part of the record. I guess my thought on this, Commissioner Imamura, is that we need to proceed apace as the threshold for next year's funding is quickly eclipsing this year's funding. And as we remarked in our last meeting, there's an executive budget that I believe is going to be submitted the first week of January, depending on how you count first or second. And so I think we should have one more convening of us as a group before that, ideally next week, and also have our executive directors reach out to the governor's staff people so that we can make sure that at least we have the outlines of a request, or maybe even more than that, ideally, before the governor when he submits his budget. Because obviously, given the situation we've wound up in right now and given the express legislative support, we want to make sure that the governor's budget has a submission for this commission that is going to be appropriate for the work that we have at hand in next year's budget.
For state fiscal year 21-22, yes, we're
affirmative. So exactly. But I thought, as I said, there are two parts. One is that I think on the staff level, just to make the trains run, the staff should be, if they haven't already, and perhaps they have already, reach out to interact with the governor's people, before that budget is submitted. And number two, that we should reconvene to discuss and have a proposal. We can discuss the level of detail so that there's something to be submitted by the governor in his budget. I think those are the next two things to pace, regardless of the current situation on the release of the current fiscal year funding.
This is Gene Banger. May I speak? I apologize again that you can't hear me. Trust me, you're not missing anything, and that you can't see me. The one point I just wanted to make was, I think based on last year's appropriation, this was not in the governor's budget. This was added by the legislature. And so while I'm absolutely in favor of Karen and Doug reaching out to the governor's people, it obviously would be better to get in there earlier. I'm not sure that if we don't make the governor's budget, it's really all that big of a deal in the end. But obviously we shouldn't waste an opportunity to do that earlier. I agree. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'd like my fellow former legislators on our side to speak about that a little bit, because I think there are a few rounds of this process that you folks are more familiar with than me.
Yeah, I think that we need to reach out to Division of Budget right away, and the appropriate people to do it would be those mentioned in the Constitution, which would be our executive directors. While I remain conflicted over asking them to do work without being able to pay them. And while they hold other jobs, which in fact may be in conflict with our mission, I think that it's really, really important for us to reach out. I spent some time in the legislature, George, even more than I did, but trying to add something back in, with all due respect to Commissioner Banger, is always more difficult than having it in the original submission. The other piece there that I think needs to be said, we need to have input into how much it is. I think it was mentioned that the old way of doing it is still being funded at $2 million a year. The way that the public voted for and the new constitutional way of redistricting, at some number, half of that, and without consideration for our need to have a whole startup of a whole operation. So I'm very concerned, obviously, by, in my opinion, we're 8 months behind, or 9, and concerned that we don't have any money to pay the people that we're asking to do work, A, and B, that we've had no input that I'm aware of into the amount that might be in next year's budget, which I think is absolutely critical to our successful functioning.
Commissioner Winter.
Yes, my concern is that with only 3 months left in the fiscal year, the $1 million that is available would not, depending on how you prorate it going forward, is going to be very, very difficult for us to plan and budget and staff accordingly between now and April 1, without having a submission in the governor's budget that would at least give us a clearer direction, rather than hoping that the legislature will fund us on April 1 or whenever they get a budget done, which is not the first time that it's ever been late. And therefore, the uncertainty of our abilities to operate efficiently and properly is really in jeopardy if we're going to just depend on the legislature to come through when they certainly haven't come through so far.
I have a comment. I agree with much of what's been said. I think that we as a committee of the whole, should go on record with a numerical request to be included in next year's budget, state budget. That meeting that Commissioner Wofford was referring to, maybe by our next meeting, we can come to an agreement on what that number should be, and then we should communicate that in writing to all appropriate leadership, governor and legislative leadership, so that we're on record as having made the request as a commission. I don't think we should, I agree, I don't think we should wait and see what the legislative leadership may or may not put in the budget on behalf of the independent redistricting commission.
Well, I mean, let's even take it even further. I mean, in the event that we were to rely on the goodwill of the legislative leaders to take care of us in the final budget, heaven forbid what would happen if they came up with nothing.
It'd be us in your garage, Commissioner Winter.
What?
It'd be us in your garage, Commissioner Winter.
I mean, it's really, really kind of frightening to think that, there are groups out there that have felt that the legislature has treated them in that fashion in the past. So I was in the legislature for an awful long time, and I got to tell you that I don't have a 100% amount of faith that would be treated the way we want to be treated in that funding cycle if we rely totally on the legislature to take care of our purported needs, on particularly if we wait till April 1. If we wait till April 1 and we don't get necessary funding. And I don't even know that we can fund this thing in good faith with hiring people, even with the $1 million between now and April 1, if we don't have relative assurances that we're going to have proper funding post April 1 going forward. I just think it's going to be very, very difficult for us to staff this operation in good faith with people without a better knowledge and better affirmation that we're going to be properly funded.
So
and again, that requires us
Yeah.
that requires us to get it would be so much more helpful for us to be in the governor's budget, even though we're really late to get in there, because most of the agency submissions or all of the agency submissions to the division of the budget were made, some time ago.
Well,
No, yeah. I agree with you, Commissioner Winter, and I think that the general consensus is that we go forward with having a meeting. I'm loath to schedule. Sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I would hope that then to follow that up and sort of an action item for us today, I would, in all due respect to my good friend Charlie Nesbitt's concerns about having people work for nothing. Charlie, you're very, very consistent on that, and appropriately so. But we need to. I think that we should direct the executive directors to meet with the Division of the Budget ASAP in order to press our cause for the necessary funding within the executive budget. Before the January 19 submission or whatever to the legislature.
I had heard it was potentially earlier. Does somebody have some clarity on that date? I had heard the 6th.
The 6th would be I think that's way too early, Keith, but I don't know for sure.
Karen, can we ask you to look into this?
Yes.
With all speed.
Okay.
You could get a meeting. The two of you get a meeting with the DOB ASAP. That would be, I think, helpful for us to have some guidance in that regard.
Commissioner Winter, you know far more about this than we do in terms of, do they need to have an amount in hand when they go into that meeting, or? Well,
certainly it would be helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think that they would need to have an amount in hand, I would, I think that if we had a meeting next week, we would hopefully be able to come up with a consensus, or the directors could come up with a consensus between the two of them and go to that meeting with that. I'm sure they would want to get back to us individually with regard to what their thoughts are with regard to that number. I don't know that we necessarily have to have a specific vote on what number we're going to ask for, but I think that if we have an understanding ballpark, I think that at least to get the discussions going. I mean, I don't want to go in there and ask for $100,000 when we need $10 million. I don't say we need $10 million, but we certainly need a lot more than what we've got on the table. If you look around the country at what other independent commissions have done, we're certainly with our $1 million that we have left over, you prorate that going forward into another fiscal year, and I think we're certainly going to need in the $5 million range.
And then, Commissioner, in terms of the level of detail that Karen and Doug will need to have, when they go into that meeting, what is the level of specificity required?
I don't know. I've never gone into one of those meetings, so I've only had to deal with the product thereof. But if they have a number to go in and just see whether or not their DOB's not going to sit there and say, well, you need $10 for this and $10 for that either. They're going to want to have some kind of a ballpark, and of course, then they have control over the expenditures. They have some control over the expenditures going forward with regard to what how the money is released.
Should we expect them to counter the budget that we request?
Well, they don't. it's not a negotiation that we have any kind of control over. So it's not a question of countering. They're going to come in and say, "Oh, thank you very much. That's that was a nice number, and here's what we're going to give you."
Okay.
Or we're going to kick it to the legislature and say, "You guys fund it," because the Constitution does say the legislature shall make those appropriations. So I don't know what DOB will do, but at the same time, it's clear that I am not comfortable leaving my fate in the hands of the legislature to do the right thing come April 1.
Commissioner Winter, even if we were to have such faith, that is still insufficient. These executive directors have to hire people. Normally, people will not go into entities that are under the cloud of a refusal to fund. So the delay to April is prejudicial to us in an irreparable way, perhaps, even if you were to presume the good faith of the folks in the legislature. So that is not acceptable.
Well, that was my prior point. My prior point was that I think it's without having some kind of a real understanding of what kind of money we're going to have. I don't know how you go forward and hire somebody for 3 months and then, or 2 months or whatever you do. And then all of a sudden, oops, sorry, we didn't get the money. So see you around. I mean, I don't know how you fund this place under those types of uncertainties. And that's been the problem. That's the problem with the delay that we've faced up to date that has created that circumstance that it makes it even more difficult for us to operate because of the delay in funding and the delay in ability of us to get going.
Should we only come to the Department of Budget with a ballpark figure, or should we also present them with an itemized budget, right? Which would be the better strategy, I guess.
Well, if I've been an agency head, so I might be a little helpful. I think if you itemize the best you can, there are issues here that are unknown that make that difficult. But I think we're going to have to ask for everything. I mean, phone systems, we don't have one. We'll have to get one. Utilities, rent. Are they going to charge us rent? Are they going to provide a place for us? IT services. What's our responsibility for record keeping, and do we have to maintain records literally forever? So beyond our personal part of being part of this commission, what form does that take? Where do they go? How do we do that? I mean, there are so many questions here because there's no precedent. It's an easy thing to say if they're giving that for $2 million to hum along as they have been. It's easy to double that number, to operate this appropriately and to get it figured out. We've done nothing in terms of, because they've given us no way to do it, in terms of getting ourselves appropriately organized and understanding what the depth of our mandate is and what the appropriate laws for record keeping and how do we manage this information. People have talked about talking with outside groups, etc. I see no reason to do any of that because we have no way to retain or manage the information that we take in. I just, we get that started once we have a way to do it so that we are good stewards of the information that we take in, that we have the money to do it, that we can keep the records, that we can, have appropriate public access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we should have a number when we go to budget. It needs to be a substantial number so that we are able to perform our mission, which again, we're months behind and we really, really, really are going to have a lot of work to do to get caught up.
Commissioner Nesbitt, based off of your experience, is there anything else that we need to prepare as part of this process? I just want to know if there's anything. Okay.
Basically, they'll tell us.
Okay.
Normally, from an agency point of view, they assign an analyst and a contact person that you deal with, and they work through the numbers with you. That would be a very helpful step. And the fact that that's not happened up to now is a real big red flag, dangerous signal from my point of view. But, you know.
So,
Okay, so I think we're in agreement. Sorry, Commissioner Wofford. Go
no,
ahead.
no, I was going to say, Council, I was agreeing on the degree of agreement. Let me try to summarize a couple of points, just so that the record is clear. Number one, that our executive directors should be working on some numbers and around which we can confer next week. And the best case scenario, we come up to a consensus on a number. At the worst case, I suspect we will merely have a range and that no commissioner believes the number is 0 and no commissioner believes the number is infinite. So we'll have one of those two things or both to go to the state with respect to the numbers. With respect to the things that have to happen between now and then, I think there was consensus that we should try to get a meeting scheduled, meaning the executive directors should, with the requisite state officials as soon as possible. And we similarly should have a follow-up meeting as soon as possible in order to accommodate a schedule that would allow there to be interaction prior to the governor's submission.
Yeah, and I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yes.
So in terms of scheduling a date, looking ahead to next week, would this time next week work, 2 o'clock on the 29th, a week from today?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes? Okay.
Works for me.
All right, we'll run it by our Commissioner Frazier, whose expertise I think will be very helpful in this. All right. So, Karen, you have your marching orders, and I think again, and I think I speak for the entire commission when I express our deep appreciation for you and Doug working unpaid as part of this process.
My pleasure.
Agreed. And let's be clear, once we get funding, and we would, at least I would anticipate as commissioner that will be retroactively addressed to the maximum extent
I
possible.
got
under
it.
the law.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, commissioners, is there any other business we wish to discuss today?
Nothing further, Commissioner Imamura.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thank you so much. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Happy
Aye.
holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Be safe.